Now let's look at a situation where A is less than 0 and C is greater than 0. So if A is less than 0 and C is greater than 0. So we're looking at C now for page 563, number 49. We're looking at C. A is less than 0 and C is greater than 0. Here was our original equation. A, x plus b, quantity squared equals C. Now let's say, so A has to be less than 0. Let's call A is negative 2. Let's say C has to be greater than 0. Let's call C 32. So we get negative 2, x plus b, quantity squared equals 32. If I divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2, I get x plus b, quantity squared equals negative 16. So I square root both sides. I'm square rooting a negative number. Can't do that. No real roots. No solution, any of these things. Undefined. Any of these things work. But when they ask how many solutions we have, we got 0. So now let's look at part D, same problem, page 563, page 49. I'm sorry, page 563, number 49. We're looking at part D, where A is greater than 0 and C equals 0. So again, our original is A, x plus b, quantity squared equals C. I'm going to say A is greater than 0, so let's say A is 4, C we know is 0. So I get 4 x plus b, quantity squared equals 0. If I divide each side by 4, I get a 0 there. So I get x plus b, quantity squared equals 0. When I square root both sides, I'm going to get a positive negative 0 here, equals x plus b. Positive or negative 0, they're the same thing. Because if you add or subtract 0 to something, it's not going to be any different. So your final answer is just going to be, when you subtract b on both sides, you get negative b plus or minus 0, but plus or minus 0 doesn't mean anything. So for this one, we're only going to have one solution, negative b. So when C equals 0, we're going to have one solution. Let's move on to number 566, or page 566, number 9. What did they ask us to do here? So they want us to do it by completing this square. So what that means is turn this left side into a perfect square trinomial. So they've already gotten the 10 over here. We don't have to worry about that. Problem is we have a coefficient here in front of the x squared. If we're completing the square, we can't do that. We have to divide everything by that to get rid of it. Pretty easy in this case. We end up with x squared minus 4x equals 2. I left a little bit of space here because we need it to put in whatever we use to complete the square. That's always a plus. You can think of it like that. So we take negative 2, because we divide this by 2. So negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. And then we square that. Whatever we add to one side, we have to add to the other side. So on this side, the whole reason we did that is so we now get x minus, there's a minus, that's going to be a minus. You can think of this as the minus 2. But it's the same thing. You can think of this minus 2 as coming down here, and this x is coming down here. And this squared kind of represents both of these. It doesn't really mathematically, but it helps for the purposes of this problem. So negative 2 squared is 4, plus 2 is 6. So we get x minus 2 quantity squared equals 6. Now we square root both sides. So now we get x minus 2 equals positive or negative square root of 6. We can't break the square root of 6 down because it's just 3 and 2. We add 2 on both sides. I'm going to add 2 there. So I get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 6. That's a simplified radical, or there's no way we can simplify it any further, therefore it's kind of already been simplified. They didn't ask us to do any simplifying. Last one here. Let's look at number 566 on page 566, number 17. They want us to complete the square, solve it by completing the square and by factoring. Let's complete the square first. It's going to be the tougher method here, but let's try it. So I'm going to subtract 9y on both sides. So now I have 2y squared minus 9y equals negative 9. I could have divided both sides by 2 first. It wouldn't have been any problem because we're going to have to get rid of that coefficient anyway. So I'm going to divide each side by 2 now to get rid of that coefficient so we can complete the square. So I get y squared minus 9 halves y equals negative 9 halves. To complete the square, I need to find out what goes here. Again, that'll always be plus there. So we take half of negative 9 over 2. Half of negative 9 over 2 is the same as negative 9 over 2 times 1/2. That's negative 9 over 4, and then we square it. Whatever we add to one side, we have to add to the other side. Negative 9 over 4 squared. Don't forget that step. I've done it before where you forget when you add to one side, you have to also add it to the other side. So this now becomes y minus, because that's a minus there, 9 over 4, quantity squared, equals all this. So this is negative 9 over 2. Negative 9 over 4 squared is negative 9 over 4 times negative 9 over 4, which is positive 81 over 16. Because 9 times 9 is 81, 4 times 4 is 16. The negatives cancel out as they do when you square. Anytime you square with a negative number or square a negative number. So you got this here. So here, let's combine these and get a common denominator. I'm going to multiply this by 8 over 8 to get negative 72 over 16 plus 81 over 16. And down here I still have y minus 9 over 4 quantity squared. I'm going to restart this down here. So I get y minus 9 over 4 quantity squared equals, and I'm going to simplify this to positive 9 over 16. If I square root both sides, I have y minus 9/4 equals positive or negative square root of 9 over square root of 16 is the same as 3 over 4. Because again, square root of 9 over square root of 16 or over 16 is the same as square root of 9 over the square root of 16, which is 3 over 4. So y minus 9 over 4 equals positive or negative 3 over 4. I add 9/4 on each side, so I get 9 over 4 plus or minus 3 over 4. So y equals this right here. So I'm going to have two solutions. So I'm going to have 9 plus 3 over 4, which is 12 over 4, which equals 3. And I'm going to have 9 minus 3 over 4, which is 6 over 4. That equals 1.5 or 1.5. So our two answers for number 17 on page 566 when we complete the square are 3 and 1.5. Let's look at that again, page 566, number 17, by factoring. So page 566, number 17, this time we are going to factor it. So I have 2y squared equals 9y minus 9. To factor, I get everything over to one side, set it equal to 0. So we got 2y squared minus 9y plus 9 equals 0. This is a modified grouping problem because we have a coefficient there. So 9 times 2 is positive 18. I need factors of positive 18 that add up to negative 9. Looks like negative 6 and negative 3. So I got 2y squared minus 6y minus 3y plus 9 equals 0. Group, 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 group. I can pull out a 2y here, so I get y, well that's a bad y, y minus 3. Here I can factor out a negative 3, y minus 3 equals 0. I get y minus 3 quantity and 2y minus 3 quantity equals 0. My two answers are going to be 3 and negative 3 over 2, or positive 3 over 2, which is the same as 1.5, but I'll just write it 3 halves. So our two answers when we do it this way are the exact same as the other way.